Hello, my name is Vanessa Valdes. I'm an onboarding specialist with Rondo Management Software. Today we'll continue with this series on accounts payable module and go over AP reports. From the master menu, you'll navigate to accounts payable, accounts payable reports. First option you'll see is vendor listing. Vendor listing displays most of the data entered in the vendor maintenance module. You have the option to enter a vendor ID or leave it as all. You also can run the report by vendor type. You can also select only active vendors, inactive vendors, or both. You can run the report either by PDF or Excel format. When you print this report, it's a pretty extensive report, and typically it's best to run it to Excel from vendor ID all the way to year-to-date sales, discounts, terms, last invoiced, last date order, year-to-date purchases, discounts, etc. Next, we can navigate to the vendor reference listing. This is a much simpler report than the vendor listing. This report will only list the vendor ID and the vendor name. Next is your vendor mailing labels. You have the option to do the numbers to print. You can do vendor ID either by a specific vendor or all, as well as vendor type. Once you print this report, it's going to look like this. So as you can see, it is in a mailing label format. Next is open item adjustment register. This is considered a daily report. It prints an audit report of all activity that has been entered in open item maintenance module and any recurring items that have been posted. You do have the option to do a beginning and ending vendor, as well as a vendor type, or leave it as all. You can run the report by Excel or PDF. The report will look as such. So it has the vendor ID, vendor name, item number, purchase order number if applicable, item date, due date, any discounts if those apply, the beginning balance, balance that's due, and the GL sequence numbers. Since this is considered a daily and it's considered a clearing report, it will ask you if the report printed okay. If the report printed okay, you can go ahead and say yes here. Next is the open item aging report. You can select a beginning date, and this report can be ran either as a summary or detail. You can select a vendor ID or leave as all. You can select a vendor type, and you can also print any zero balances items. And you can run the report by Excel or PDF format. Once the report is ran, it's going to look as such. So it has the account name, phone number, total due, and it will disperse the amounts accordingly. Next is the open invoice listing. This report prints every invoice by vendor with the vendor totals as well. You'll select a vendor ID or leave as all. You can select a vendor type. This report is also used to run as a standard or an as of. This report can also be used for month-end reconciliations for AP, since it has the as of reports. And the as of report can also be ran by detail or by summary. The report looks as such. So therefore, it will list all invoices by vendor with the vendor totals as well. Next will be the open invoice listing by period. And this will list all invoices regardless if the item is open or not. So you have the option to do a vendor ID or leave as all. And since this is an open invoice listing by period, you have the option to select the period here or leave as all, and also an option to print zero balance items. You can print to Excel or PDF. So the AP open invoice listing by period. So therefore it would list the vendor ID, vendor number, the vendor name, so vendor ID, vendor name, invoice, PO number if it applies, item date, due date, beginning balances, discounts, and on the far right you'll see the period. So the posting period will show up on this report. Next is the invoice history listing. This will list all invoices for the vendor regardless of whether they have been cleared, paid, or not. And under the invoice history listing, you have the option to do it by vendor ID or leave it as all, vendor type, and you have a beginning and end date that you can enter here. And you would be able to run it to Excel or print PDF. And the report, the AP invoice history report, look as such. So vendor number, name, item number, PO number, item date, beginning balances. Next is items selected for payment listing. This report can be ran prior to printing checks to make sure the items selected in the payment selection screen are ready. You can print it to Excel or PDF. And it will display any items that are currently selected in the payment selection screen. It will also let you know the amount of checks that will be required if you're going to go ahead and run these via checks. Next is your vendor history by GL account. This report allows you to view vendor activity by GL account number. And this report will also have posting period, GL sequence numbers, check numbers, paid date, and if it was a debit or a credit. So again, you can use a vendor ID or leave as all. Vendor type is also an option. You have a beginning and end date, and then you have your starting account number. So like, for example, if you would like to run the report based off of the suspense GL account, and you can mark the items paid items only, or you can unselect this option. You can print it to PDF as well as Excel. And this report for the vendor history by GL account looks as such. So you have the post sequence number, date, reference number, the date of the item, any social security numbers if they apply that have been entered in vendor maintenance, and the totals. And it will display whether it was a credit or a debit. Next is inventory cost change report. Any cost changes that are made of the cost of the material or freight during the PO review and open item maintenance will show up on this report. This report will also include the user ID who had made the change, You have your branch number here. It will default to the current branch. Beginning date. And the end date. So on this report, you'll have the date, the vendor number, purchase order number, the style of the material, color, roll number, the user ID, and what the item cost change was. So it was originally, like this one, for example, is $3.49, and it was changed to $6.58. Open item audit report. This report will display the total cost changes made to material or freight and during the PO review and open item maintenance. It will also include general ledger account numbers that were impacted during the change. So you have your branch, beginning date, end date. You can run the report by vendor ID or leave as all. And then you also have a few other options here. Open item audit report will include the date, the vendor, invoice number, and the GL distributions, which GL account it impacted, and the total. Next, we'll be going to AP reports 2 of 2. First option is the print checks option, which we reviewed during the first training of the series. Next, you have the print electronic payment report. The print electronic payment report, no actual checks will be printed, but it will print a report listing with the invoices that are selected in the payment selection screen prior to running this report. You can only select one vendor at a time. It can either be a next check or an auto debit. You will select the correct account. You'll enter the vendor ID that was previously selected in the payment selection screen. You'll have the debit date. Debit number will automatically be generated through the system. You have an option to put in a reference number, and then you can print the report, which will now create the electronic payment report showing the invoices that were selected, the date, a PO number if that applies, the amount due, any discounts that we're taking, and the amount that is being paid with the total. And since this is a clearing report, it will ask you if the report printed okay. If that is the case, go ahead and say yes. And then you have one other chance. Are you sure? Yes. Check register. This was also reviewed during the first video of this series. Anytime you do a check run, enter a hand check or an auto debit, it is important for you to clear the AP check register, and this is considered a daily report. You have the chance to do a beginning account number and an ending account number, or you can run each account number individually. It's up to you. And here it will go ahead and show, like for example, the electronic payment that I just made, it will show the check number with an E at the end, since it was an electronic payment. the vendor name, sequence, so the GL sequence, open item number, previous balance, and the amount paid with the total. Again, since it is a clearing report, excuse me, it will ask you if the report printed okay. And one more chance, are you sure? After you clear the check register, all that history will go to the check register history report. And this report will hold all history of any check registers cleared via that check register. You can enter the GL account number, and you can go ahead and put a range between the account numbers if you like. You have the option to do the register date and a beginning and end date, or by the actual check date, and you have the option to do it by a beginning or end date. This report can be ran to Excel or PDF. When you run the report, it will show that it is a history report. So we'll say AP check register history with the register date that was entered previously, the check number, check date, vendor name, item number, amount paid, and any discounts if those apply. Next is the Print AP Form 1099. This will print the 1099 forms for all vendors that have a Social Security number in the vendor maintenance screen. And you can refer back to our knowledge base manual for the Print AP Forms 1099. Next is the Print Cash Requirements Report. And this prints a list of all payables due in the range of days. This is a great report if you would like to see the cash that's required to pay the current bills. You can choose to print with notes. You can look for a specific vendor or leave it as all. You also have the option for a vendor type if you like, and the beginning date. You can run this report to Excel, or you can print it to PDF. So you have the vendor information, name, item number, the item date, the due date, and it will let you know when each of those invoices are due. This report will also show totals at the very bottom. So the balance due, so it tells you all invoices and credit memos will be listed on this report, and it will show you a grand total, and then the amount that is due in each bracket. Thank you, and this does conclude AP reports.